My name is Mike Satz, as Mariah said, and I am the Executive Officer for the University of Idaho in southwestern Idaho. So I'm the Associate Vice President responsible for basically from McCall down through the Treasure and Magic Valleys is essentially my territory responsibility. I'm also a member of the law faculty at the university, although mostly I'm doing administration these days and not doing fun teaching things. And so, but hi, Dr. Friedman, or as I like to call you, hey, Sydney. How are you doing? And so this is great. This is a great treat for me. I love working with students and doing student-oriented things. So I was very happy when you got a hold of me, Mariah.
Good, thank you. I really appreciate your time. We'll jump right into the questions.
Okay.
My first one is, how can leaders in the field of education, like yourself, guide this transition with technology that we're experiencing today for their staff and faculty, to help their staff and faculty prepare for the modern version of education?
Sure. So here at the University of Idaho in Boise, we're actually heavily dependent on technology in our classrooms. Almost all of our classes are either distance courses or they deliver to multiple locations. Some are synchronous, some are asynchronous, and it really just depends. We have some that deliver to classrooms. We have others that deliver to kitchen tables, right? And we have the students across, and we even have a studio in here for teachers to prepare their courses and things like that. The things that leaders can do is be open to ideas, new ideas, because there's all kinds of new ways to do things. Young learners, and almost all learners now are young to me. I don't know how that happened, but it did. Learn differently. They're used to different sorts of things. And so we need to be open to new ideas on how to do that. We need to be open to allowing people to experiment and not punitive when some experiments fail, because it's the only way you're going to learn is let's try this. Okay, that didn't work. Let's try that. I remember with the law school setting up classrooms for distance education. It took us a while just to figure out where to put cameras and what the best camera angles are and how to use the cameras and that kind of thing.
Right.
And you just have to understand that it's different and it's a different experience, and it takes time to learn how to do it, and it takes experimentation and innovation to do it. So
yeah, I think that's a great point. One of the things that the authors that we're reading talk about is the being open to new things, new forms of communication. Students today might be using Snapchat. People like us have never used that. What is that? But not shutting down a total new way of communication if it's actually one that will help.
Scary.
I know. Don't be afraid of technology. So are there any interesting technological advances? You kind of just touched on a couple in education that you'd like to share, and maybe that you're planning on implementing or already implementing with the university?
Yeah, you know, it's always changing. It's changing so fast. So Zoom, which we all should be familiar with now and use, when we first started using it at the university, it was like, wow, we finally, because we were using all these other services that didn't work and we're a mess, and then Zoom was new. But things change so fast, and you actually mentioned Snapchat, right? But there's all kinds of other ways to do it too. I mean, there's just simple texts and things like that. So when you're teaching somebody, right, there's a couple of things that have to come into play, right? There's got to keep people's attention, right? So to keep a student's attention, you have to figure out, well, what do they like to pay attention to? So for those of us who do live courses, a lot of us, at least I do, I use comedy in I'm a funny guy up there. Right?
Yeah,
That's
get
my
people's
style,
attention.
Right?
And
that's how I do it. Well, it's different online, and so how are you going to do that online, right? It's contact. It's how are you staying in contact with people? Do you do it with text? Do you do it through Snapchat or some other sort of video service or something like that? It's availability to your student. So how can you make yourself available in a meaningful way to that student? Student success is often closely correlated to students finding a mentor or mentors in an institution. Well, technology changes that relationship, right? And to a guy like me, right, that's weird, right? It's weird to kind of meet someone online and talk and that kind of thing. But to these younger folks, it's normal, right? That's how they make friends. And so maybe we have to change how we do that. But there's all these different things that we can be looking at for communication and staying in touch, and then also just keeping attention in the subject matter. But what's neat about technology is it gives you all these different ways to teach your subject matter. So I have a class that I teach. It's called Critical Legal Studies, and I tell my students, you teach it. Right? Here are the subjects we're going to cover. I'm going to make you read these articles, right? But you pick how you teach it, and you go do it. You tell me how you're going to do it, right? And so I had a really cool experience once with a group of students, and they used YouTube. They used all kinds of different ways to get media. They got things from England, prints from England, and they had it on the screen and that kind of thing, right? It was really engaging and really fun. They used music. I mean, all the kinds of things they did, and that was my first experience saying, oh, these kids, they're different from how I learned, right?
Yeah.
I
think that's an excellent point, because education doesn't have to be this dry, stuffy thing in a classroom.
Yeah.
It can be super in students' lives. YouTube videos. Who doesn't watch a YouTube video every day?
Right.
So really accessible. Next question would be, what role do you see technology playing in creating educational opportunities? Do you think it will give better access to many students, or maybe heighten the quality of access to education for a few students?
So it will clearly give better access. Right? And one thing that we're really bad as people, when we think about will this work or will this not work, we often think about ourselves, right? And we think about our own personal experiences. And my personal experience is in a classroom, I work really well in a classroom. I learn in classrooms all the time, and this is what I've done. That may not be the same for everybody, and not everybody has the same opportunities or has the same background that I have. I grew up in kind of next to a city, and I had lots of close connections and things like that. A rural student can't help but have their access increased by having online education
options. Yeah.
So you can't not make that better, right? Mm-hmm. Same thing with students who may not have other resources or the ability to get somewhere, right? We can take education and we can push it out, right? Mm-hmm. Well, the trick is, how are we going to do it in a meaningful and engaging way?
Right.
It will also, I think, it can also benefit a few. There are certain things that maybe are just very expensive or hard to get a hold of, and there's a few people who will be able to benefit from that as well, I think. But I think in general, with the costs going down of abilities to connect to the internet and that kind of thing, that I think it really will make access much better for people. It may not be the same as I experienced, but we have to get comfortable with change.
Yeah, I hope so. I really hope so. And then what skill sets would you like to see your employees cultivating in order to be prepared for using more technology in our society, in our schools?
So I assume you're all students. And I assume you've all had professors stand up at the podium trying to push the button or on the computer. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? So we need to have a basic level of technological competence and not be afraid of technology. Right? I have lots of colleagues who I can't do it, and they get in their heads, and I can't make this work, and all that kind of stuff. So just this basic level of technological competency. Now, it's not entirely a teacher's fault. It's new. We keep giving them new things. I think Zoom is like the third video system or fourth video system I've engaged with at the university. So we have to, standardize what we're doing. So it's intuitive, and a lot of this technology is in fact intuitive to younger people, right? It's all, they can move across platforms and do different things. You got to understand, someone who started out with, like, high tech to me was a phone with a long cord, and I could go sit on the couch, right? That was cool when that happened. So getting on the iPhone and figuring that out, and I'm actually pretty technically savvy compared to a lot of folks my age, but it's still something that they need to have skills in the technology. And the second thing is, you also have to have skills in teaching. It's a different pedagogy when you're teaching by a distance, right? And it's different depending on what your teaching by a distance system is, right? So if I'm teaching an asynchronous class and I'm just talking, it's a different way to engage the student, because they can come on at any time. If it's a synchronous class and everybody's in a classroom, it's a different way to engage the students. If it's a synchronous class and I've got 20 people in 20 different locations, it's a different way to engage the students. And we have to learn how each way works best for us and works best for the classroom, right? And
right.
That's hard and scary for a lot of folks, myself included.
So having educators being open to changing their class structure, that makes sense. The final question I've got for you would be, what areas of higher education might be better served by relying more heavily on technology and less on human labor? If there's things, we could automate or...
So, and that's a hard one, right? But there are a lot of areas where I think we could make things more automated, right? And certainly anyone who's related to the University of Idaho and has to register or deal with that stuff, like we know those one of our back office functions could be more automated, and it would be way more friendly.
Right.
A lot of the stuff, the way we do things, we register, we do things as just a student, being part of student life, it's pretty arcane. Even though I'll tell you, in the last decade, it's modernized amazingly from what it was. But it's still, there's things that we can do. I would be very interested to see, are there different kinds of subjects that can be automated, or different segments of a class that can be automated, right? Now, the problem with teaching is, as a teacher, it's important to be able to figure out how to get feedback from a student so you can tell. And sometimes the student isn't even meaning to give you feedback. Sometimes it's body language in a live class, like, she doesn't understand what I'm saying, right? And so you can slow it down and say, okay, let's do that, right? And so the question is, what can we teach that can just be entirely automated, but then what needs the feedback? And the thing is, students are so different. You have some students that never miss a beat, they're way up here, right? But then you have a bunch of students maybe that are down here, and they get confused by things. They haven't had experience or things like that, and they haven't seen things to put them in context. So something that you think is obvious is confusing to them. Then you have that big middle of the class, right? And you have to be able to read all of them. Right?
Yeah.
And so we have to figure out how technology can help us get that feedback so that we can then continue to figure out how we teach it and we adjust to teach our class, right? And that's one thing that I'm not sure I know how to do just yet. But I think, again, you're open to new ideas to try to figure that out. So.
Yeah, that will be one of our challenges going forward as we do increasingly use technology in the classroom. So. Well, thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate your time.
You bet. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.